Mrs. Harris was 74 years old, and she lived in a small, quiet neighborhood. Her little house had white walls, blue shutters, and a porch where she liked to sit in the mornings with a cup of tea. She had lived there for over 40 years, watching the seasons change, the neighbors come and go, and children grow into adults who moved away. She was gentle, calm, and respectful, and the people who truly knew her admired her strength. But not everyone in the neighborhood showed kindness. At first, the trouble started in small ways. A group of young men often stood at the corner of her street, laughing loudly and playing music too harsh for the calm of the neighborhood. Mrs. Harris ignored them. She thought they were just restless young people with too much free time. But slowly, she noticed their eyes turning toward her, their whispers and mocking laughter when she passed. One afternoon, as she walked back from the grocery store with her small cart, she heard one of them say something rude in her direction. She held her head high and kept walking, pretending she hadn't heard, but her heart grew heavy. Mrs. Harris was not a woman who liked trouble. She had grown up in a time when life was much harder, when she had to fight quietly for her dignity and survival. Back then, she had faced doors closed in her face, long walks to school in the rain, and people who judged her unfairly. Those experiences had shaped her into a strong, wise woman. Now, at 74, she wished only for peace, a quiet evening on her porch, and friendly smiles from her neighbors. But life was testing her again, and she felt the pressure rising around her. The young men began making their presence clearer. Sometimes they blocked her walkway, standing in a line as if daring her to say something. Other times, they laughed as she tried to pass by, whispering words meant to scare or annoy her. Mrs. Harris tried to remain calm, telling herself not to give them the reaction they wanted. Each evening, she sat by her window, looking out at the street, and wondered why they had chosen her. Was it because she lived alone? Was it because of her age? Or was it simply because she carried herself with a dignity they could not understand? One Sunday morning, when she returned from church in her neat blue dress and hat, she found her fence marked with spray paint. Her hands trembled as she touched the rough letters, a sign of disrespect to her home. She didn't cry, though she felt like crying. Instead, she took a cloth and tried to wipe it off, but the paint was too strong. She sat on the porch with her eyes closed, whispering softly to herself, "Lord, give me strength." Neighbors walked by, some looking concerned but saying nothing. They knew the young men were causing trouble, but fear kept them silent. Mrs. Harris didn't blame them. She understood fear. Still, she wished someone would have the courage to stand by her. Yet deep inside, she also knew that her life had taught her one lesson: strength sometimes means standing alone until the right moment. The days continued, and each one tested her patience. She walked to the store, holding her cane firmly, ignoring the shouts behind her. She watered her flowers, even when she heard laughter near her fence. She carried herself with grace, though her heart beat faster whenever she saw the group gathering. At night, she would sit by her small lamp, remembering her younger years. She remembered how her mother used to tell her, "Never let anyone steal your peace. You are stronger than they know." She remembered how she raised her children with those same words, teaching them to face life with courage. Now, in her old age, those lessons returned to her. She smiled softly, even as tears filled her eyes, because she knew her mother's voice was still guiding her. The harassment grew bolder. One evening, as she tried to drive to the store, she found her driveway blocked by the gang's bicycles. She stepped out of her car and asked gently, "Could you move your bikes, please?" Instead of moving them, they smirked and pretended not to hear. One boy laughed loudly, as if her words were a joke. Mrs. Harris stood there, her cane steady on the ground, her back straight, and her eyes firm. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. She simply turned around, walked back into her house, and locked the door. Inside, she sat down slowly, her hands shaking just a little. She knew she could not go on like this. But she also knew that every storm has its time, and when the right moment comes, the clouds break. Mrs. Harris had lived long enough to know that sometimes, silence was more powerful than shouting. She leaned back in her chair, sipped her tea, and reminded herself of who she was, a woman who had seen hardship, who had seen injustice, who had survived trials far worse than this. She looked at the small photo frame on her table. It was a picture of her younger self, standing proudly beside people she had once helped. In her long life, she had cared for many, guided many, and loved many. She had given her best to the world, and the world had not forgotten. She smiled faintly, touching the frame. "They don't know who I am," she whispered. That night, as the laughter echoed faintly outside her window, she closed her eyes and prayed for patience. But she also began to think about what she could do. She was not powerless. She had lived too long, built too many bonds, and touched too many lives to be left standing alone. Somewhere out there, someone remembered her kindness. Somewhere out there, someone still owed her a favor. Her heart grew calmer as she thought about it. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to fight. She only needed to choose the right time to act. And when that time came, one phone call would be enough. For now, she kept her peace, even as the trouble circled closer. She knew her moment would come. She sat by her window, looking out at the street where the gang laughed, her face calm and her spirit unbroken. The storm was rising, but so was her strength. And though the world around her didn't know it yet, Mrs. Harris was preparing for the moment when her quiet dignity would turn into action. Mrs. Harris woke up before sunrise, as she always did. The house was still and quiet. She boiled water for tea and opened the small kitchen window to let in the cool morning air. The world felt gentle at this hour. She liked the way the birds spoke softly to each other. She hoped the day would stay this calm. She hoped the young men on the corner would not return. She carried her tea to the porch and looked at the street. The sidewalk was empty. For a moment, she let her shoulders rest. By 8 o'clock, the neighborhood had started moving. A mail truck rolled by. A woman pushed a stroller and smiled at her. Across the street, a man loaded tools into his truck. It looked like any other morning. Mrs. Harris decided to walk to the small store 2 blocks away. She took her cloth bag and her list. Milk. Bread. Apples. A box of tea if it was on sale. She locked her door and started down the path, moving slowly but steadily with her cane. She noticed the corner before she heard the music. The group was there again, leaning against a fence and talking loud. She fixed her gaze on the store sign in the distance and kept walking. She did not change her pace. One of the young men said something rude. Another laughed. Her heart pinched a little, but her steps did not stop. She had learned, long ago, that not every taunt deserved an answer. Still, the sound followed her, and the morning felt less kind. Inside the store, the air smelled like coffee and fresh bread. Mr. Patel stood behind the counter, counting change. He looked up and smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Harris." His voice was gentle. He had known her for years. He saw how she moved slower now, but he also saw the steady fire inside her eyes. "How are you today?" "I am blessed," she said softly. She chose a loaf of bread, checked the price of tea, and put 6 apples in a small paper bag. Mr. Patel noticed the way her fingers shook slightly. He placed the items near the register and lowered his voice. "Are those boys still bothering you?" "They're just loud," she said, not wanting to worry him. "I'll be fine." "If you ever need help," he said, leaning forward, "you tell me. I can call someone. I can walk you home." He meant it. He had seen too many good people feel alone when they should not be. Mrs. Harris thanked him. She paid, tucked the receipt in her bag, and took a deep breath before stepping outside. The street felt different now. She glanced at the corner. They were still there, spread out, and talking. One of them noticed her and elbowed another. Mrs. Harris kept walking. Halfway home, she heard a bicycle tire scrape the curb behind her. She did not turn. She walked to the rhythm of her cane, one step, then another. When she reached her gate, she could hear faint laughter. She unlocked the door and went inside. She placed the apples in a bowl and arranged them so the red and green made a friendly pattern. Then she sat at the table and waited for her breathing to slow. She took out a small notebook, the one she used for recipes and reminders. On a fresh page, she wrote the date. Then, in neat, simple lines, she wrote what time she went to the store, what time she came back, and what she had heard. She did not add anger to the page. She added facts. She knew that facts were a kind of light. They helped people see clearly when memory tried to hide the truth. When she finished, she closed the notebook and placed it by the bowl of apples. By afternoon, the sun was higher and the street was quiet again. Mrs. Harris pulled on her gardening gloves and knelt near the flower bed. The young marigolds needed water. A few stems were bent where someone had stepped on them. She pressed the soil gently around each plant and whispered, "Grow strong." While she worked, the neighbor girl, Amira, came by with her small dog on a leash. Amira was 15 and kind. She had a bright, careful smile. "Your flowers are pretty," Amira said, stopping by the fence. "So is your little friend," Mrs. Harris answered, reaching to let the dog sniff her glove. "How's school?" "Hard," Amira said, then laughed. "But good, too." She hesitated, looking over her shoulder toward the corner. "If you ever want, I could install one of those door cameras for you. My uncle is good with tools. He can help." "That's very thoughtful," Mrs. Harris said, touched. "Let me think about it." She meant it. She was careful with decisions, but she remembered the notebook on her table and how the facts felt like light. A camera was another kind of light. She watered the marigolds and thanked Amira for stopping by. After the girl left, the garden looked calmer, as if it had taken a deep drink and sighed. In the late afternoon, Mrs. Harris called her church friend, Miss Evelyn. They had known each other since they were young women. Miss Evelyn listened without interrupting as Mrs. Harris described the noise, the laughter, the feeling of being watched. "I know that feeling," Miss Evelyn said. "But look how steady you are. You are not alone. Do you want me to come over?" "Not today," Mrs. Harris said. "But your voice helps." They spoke about old songs and a pie recipe they had once tried and ruined. Laughter returned to the room. When they hung up, the house did not feel so large. The quiet felt like rest, not emptiness. Near sunset, the group drifted away, and the street softened. Mrs. Harris sat on the porch with a shawl over her shoulders. She watched the sky turn pink and then a gentle gray. The evening made the houses look closer to each other, as if the whole block took a step in. A few neighbors walked by and waved. A delivery driver slowed down, saw her, and smiled. She returned each greeting. She liked the way small kindnesses added up. They were small stones that made a strong path. But the days that followed were not all easy. The group grew bold on some evenings. They left a bottle near her steps one night, not broken, not dangerous, but careless. She picked it up with a paper towel and put it in the recycling bin. She wrote the date and time in her notebook. Once, she found the lid of her trash can tilted off like a challenge. She straightened it, and again she wrote it down. She refused to be pushed into a burst of anger. She chose steady actions instead. On Wednesday, she walked to the bus stop to visit the clinic for a routine check. The group was not on the corner that morning. She felt lighter as the bus rolled in. At the clinic, the nurse took her blood pressure and smiled. "You're doing well," the nurse said. "Are you sleeping okay?" "Some nights are louder than others," Mrs. Harris said in a quiet voice. The nurse looked up, thoughtful, but did not press. On the way home, Mrs. Harris stared out the window and remembered the earlier years of her life. She remembered the children she had read to in the library after school. She remembered the teenagers she had guided to their first jobs. She remembered writing letters for people who struggled with forms and papers. She remembered that kindness had a long memory. That afternoon, she received a letter. The envelope was tidy and official. Inside was a note from a woman she once mentored, now a respected leader in the city. The note thanked her for her steady guidance years ago and mentioned an upcoming community event. "You taught me to walk with quiet courage," the letter said. "I try to do the same for others." Mrs. Harris held the paper in both hands and felt warmth rise in her chest. She placed the letter next to the photo frame on her table. That night, the street was noisy again. Music thumped from a car. Voices rose and fell in sharp bursts. Mrs. Harris stood by her window and watched from a distance. Most of the faces were hard to see in the dark. For a moment, two eyes met hers. One of the young men, slimmer than the others, looked at her without a smirk. His gaze flickered, unsure. Then he turned away. The music continued. She stepped back from the window and breathed slowly. Not everyone is the same, she thought. Even a crowded noise is made of different voices. The next day, the mail carrier, Miss Lopez, knocked on her door to deliver a parcel. "This was left at the office by mistake," Miss Lopez said. "I wanted to bring it to you myself." She looked past Mrs. Harris toward the street, weighing her words. "If you ever need me to call someone while I'm on my route, I will." "Thank you," Mrs. Harris said, and meant it. She felt the strong thread of community tighten around her, quiet but real. After Miss Lopez left, Mrs. Harris opened the parcel. Inside was a small plant from her niece, with a note that said, "For your porch. It likes gentle light." Mrs. Harris smiled. She set the plant near the front steps, where the morning sun would greet it. On Friday evening, the group's laughter drifted closer again. Someone tossed a handful of pebbles toward her fence. They hit the wood with soft taps. She felt a sting of sadness more than fear. She looked at her flowers, at the neat porch, at the small plant from her niece, and decided she would not let these moments define her home. She turned on the porch light. The soft circle of brightness reached the steps and stopped there like a calm guard. Inside, she opened a drawer and took out an old address book. The pages were wrinkled at the corners. Names filled the pages in tidy rows, some underlined, some with small stars beside them. She traced a finger over familiar letters. People she had helped. People who had helped her. Some were gone now. Many had moved. But some names still held power, and a few had grown into something larger than even she had guessed. She did not dial any number that night. Instead, she placed the address book next to her notebook on the table. She read her notes again, each line quiet and clear. She looked at the framed photo on the shelf, the one with the smiling faces of young people she had once guided. She let the warmth in the picture steady her. She turned off the kitchen light and left the porch light on. When she lay down, the house felt balanced. The outside world was still out there, with its noise and challenges. But inside, she had order. She had truth on paper. She had a circle of people who cared. And she had her own calm, which had carried her through much tougher times. She closed her eyes and heard her mother's old words as if they were spoken in the next room. "Do not let anyone take your peace." She kept those words like a small flame. Morning arrived again. The street was cool and pale. Mrs. Harris made tea and watered the porch plant. A neighbor she barely knew lifted a hand in greeting. She lifted her hand back. She looked toward the corner. It was empty. She knew that could change quickly. But she also knew something else now. She was ready. When the moment came, she would not be pushed into a loud fight or a fearful retreat. She would choose her time and her way. She would choose a call, a calm voice, and a clear path. For now, she would keep living her life, tending the flowers, greeting the mail carrier, shopping at Mr. Patel's, and writing her notes. She would keep being herself, the woman who had spent a lifetime building quiet bridges between people. She would keep trusting that kindness carries farther than noise. And when the day came that required more, she would turn a page in the address book, press a single button, and let the power of remembered goodness do the rest. The morning began with a soft drizzle, and the sky looked like a pale gray blanket pulled tight over the neighborhood. Mrs. Harris liked rain. It made the air feel clean and the sidewalks smell fresh. She stood at her porch rail for a minute, watching drops cling to the leaves. She took a slow breath and told herself she would not rush today. She would move with care, like always, but she would also move with purpose. Something inside her said the day would ask her to make a clear choice. By mid-morning, the drizzle stopped, and the street grew brighter. A delivery van drove by. A child in a yellow jacket ran after a rolling ball. Across the way, a neighbor adjusted a ladder and waved at her. She waved back, feeling the steady beat of normal life. Then she noticed the corner. The group was there again, not loud yet, but gathered, leaning, watching. The old feeling returned like a cold finger touching the back of her neck. She refused to let it reach her heart. She took her notebook from the table and read yesterday's notes. Dates. Times. A few short lines in neat handwriting. It looked like a small book of truth. She placed the notebook in her bag and put on her coat. She wanted to go to the pharmacy for a refill. She locked her door gently and walked to her car. The air was cool and kind, but as she stepped off the porch, she stopped. Her driveway was blocked. 3 scooters and a bike were parked across it as if someone had laid a gate made of metal and rubber. For a moment, she stood still. Her cane pressed into the ground. Her eyes moved from the scooter handles to the careless angle of the bike tire resting against her fence. She lifted her gaze to the corner. 2 of the young men were looking her way. One nudged the other. A small smile passed across a face. She felt sadness, not fear. She felt a tiredness that came from seeing people choose the wrong path even when the road was wide open in front of them. She walked forward and stopped near the scooters. Her voice was steady. Please move these. I need to leave. She did not raise her tone. She did not beg. She simply told the truth. One boy cupped his ear like he could not hear her and laughed. Another looked down at his phone, pretending she was not there. The quiet of the street seemed to pull tight around them. She waited a breath, then another, then turned back to her porch. Inside her house, she closed the door and stood in the calm she had built with care. Her kitchen held the soft smell of tea. The picture frame on the shelf held the steady light of younger smiles. She took off her coat, set her cane beside the table, and placed her hand on the old address book. The cover was worn smooth by years of use. Names filled it, people she had known, helped, and loved. Some had moved away. Some had grown into roles she would never have guessed when they were 15 and unsure. One name glowed in her mind as if someone had placed a small candle beside it. She sat down and turned the pages. There it was, Elena Brooks. Years ago, Elena had been a shy teenager who came to the library after school to read silently in a corner. Mrs. Harris had noticed her, guided her to books that matched her bright eyes, and encouraged her to speak up in the after-school club. Elena had found her voice there. That voice had grown. Now Elena was the city's director of community partnerships, the kind of leader who brought people together and kept her promises. Mrs. Harris had held Elena's graduation photo once, a day Elena's mother had cried happy tears and said, "You helped lift my daughter." Mrs. Harris lifted her phone and stared at the screen. She did not hurry. She checked the time. She checked her heart. Then she tapped the number. The line rang once, twice. On the third ring, a familiar warmth flowed into her ear. "This is Elena." Her voice sounded busy but open. "Hello, dear," Mrs. Harris said, and the simple word dear carried years of kindness inside it. There was a small pause, and then a surprised, bright joy. "Mrs. Harris? Is that you?" Elena said. "I was just thinking about you after I reread your note. How are you?" "I am steady," Mrs. Harris said. "But I need help." Elena's tone changed in a breath from warmth to attention. "Tell me everything," she said. Mrs. Harris opened her notebook. She read her notes calmly. She gave times and dates. She described the markings on her fence from last week, the bottle on the step 2 nights ago, the scooters across her driveway just now. She did not add anger to her voice. She added details. She did not try to guess motives. She shared facts. Elena listened without interrupting. When Mrs. Harris finished, Elena took a careful breath. "Thank you for writing it down," she said. "You always taught us that facts are a way of seeing clearly." She spoke with a gratitude that reached back years. "Here is what I will do. First, I'm calling our community safety officer assigned to your area. He's a good man and respectful. He will come today. Second, I will ask our youth outreach team to coordinate with him. Some of these boys need guidance as much as they need warnings. Third, I'm arranging a patrol car to circle your block more often for the next few days. And I will come by myself tomorrow morning. I want to see you." "You're busy," Mrs. Harris said softly. "You do not need to." "I do," Elena said gently, but with certainty. "You once stood for me when I was small. Now I will stand for you." Mrs. Harris closed her eyes for a second, then opened them to the simple light of her kitchen. "Thank you, dear." "One more thing," Elena said. "Do you feel safe right now?" "I am inside," Mrs. Harris said. "The door is locked. I have neighbors who care, even if they are quiet. And I have a notebook full of truth." Elena almost smiled through the phone. Mrs. Harris could hear it. "All right. Officer Reed will be there this afternoon. The outreach team will follow. If anything changes, call me again. You have my number anytime." "I will," Mrs. Harris said. They said goodbye with a tenderness shaped by years of shared respect. When the call ended, the house seemed to breathe with her. She placed the phone down like a tool that had done its good work and rested her hand on the address book. She did not feel triumphant or proud. She felt aligned. She had asked for help in the right way, at the right time, from the right person. Her mother's old words sounded near again: "Do not let anyone take your peace." She had kept her peace and used it like a key. A light knock came at her door less than an hour later. Morning came bright and clear, as if the rain had washed the whole street clean. Mrs. Harris stood on her porch with her shawl around her shoulders and watched the light slide over the rooftops. The world looked fresh. She felt steady. She had made the call that mattered, and now she would meet the day with calm eyes. A little before 9, a quiet car pulled up to the curb. A man in a neat jacket stepped out and walked toward her gate. He moved with care, like someone who knew how to enter another person's space with respect. He introduced himself in a friendly tone. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Officer Reed. Director Brooks asked me to come by." "Thank you for coming," Mrs. Harris said. She led him to the porch chairs. He took out a small notebook, but he did not rush. He asked how she was, if she had slept, if she felt safe right now. Then he asked if she would show him her notes. Mrs. Harris brought out her notebook and set it on the small porch table. The pages were full of steady handwriting, dates, times, simple lines that held careful truth. Officer read the notes and nodded. He asked a few gentle questions. What time did the noise usually begin? Where did they stand? Did she recognize any faces? Did she feel okay pointing them out from a distance so he could keep an eye on things? I can point, she said softly. I don't want to harm anyone. I only want peace. That is exactly what we want too, he said. Peace with respect. Accountability that teaches, not just punishes. He looked up and smiled kindly. Director Brooks speaks very highly of you. She was a brave girl, Mrs. Harris said, and her eyes shone. Now she is a brave leader. They walked the small path by the fence. Officer Reed looked at the faint paint marks that had not fully washed away. He took photographs. He looked at the bent marigolds and the way the soil had been pressed down by careless feet. He made notes about the driveway, the spot where the scooters had blocked her car. When he finished, he said, I'm going to call the youth outreach team and ask them to meet me here. We will speak to the young men calmly. We will set boundaries. And I will also increase patrols on your block for a while. He paused. Would you like help installing a door camera? The city has a program for elders. We can place one today if you're willing. Mrs. Harris thought of Amira's offer and her own line in the notebook about light. Yes, she said. I would like that very much. He made another note and radioed a request. By mid-morning, the street began to fill with gentle motion. A white van arrived with two community workers, a man named Marcus and a woman named Tasha. They wore blue vests that said outreach. Both had warm eyes and calm voices. They greeted Mrs. Harris with deep respect, then spoke with Officer Reed in low tones. A little later, a second car parked behind them. Two technicians stepped out with a small box and a polite smile. Door camera team, one said. We'll place the device by your bell and help you set it up, ma'am. Mrs. Harris stood aside and watched the teamwork fold around her home like careful hands. Marcus walked up the block, not toward the corner at first, but to the neighbors. He introduced himself to Miss Lopez, the mail carrier, who had stopped to see if Mrs. Harris needed anything. He spoke to Mr. Patel, who had come out of his store to check on her. He asked them to share what they had seen, if they felt comfortable. They did. They told simple facts. They agreed to write short statements later. They did it for their neighbor, and also for the kind of street they wanted to live on. Tasha stayed with Mrs. Harris while the technicians installed the camera. You taught half the city to read with heart, Tasha said, smiling as she adjusted the app on a little tablet. I was one of those kids, she added softly. I used to sit in your library corner after school. You would bring me the big picture books and let me take them home. You didn't know it, but my mother was very tired then. Those books kept my mind clear. Mrs. Harris felt a warmth spread under her ribs. I am glad you found the pages you needed, she said. When the camera beeped a soft chime and the technician said, all set, the light on the device glowed like a small guardian. They showed her how to see the front step on the screen, how to save a video if anything happened, how to call for help with one tap. She practiced, her hands careful but sure. Before noon, two dark SUVs rolled in and parked quietly. No sirens, no horns, only a firm, steady presence. The doors opened, and a small group of senior community officers stepped out along with a woman in a gray suit who walked like someone who belonged exactly where she was. It was Elena. She did not wave from the street. She walked to the porch, climbed the steps, and took both of Mrs. Harris's hands in hers. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elena said, with a voice that held gratitude, I am here. You always were, Mrs. Harris said. They smiled, and the years between them folded away like paper. Elena spoke briefly with Officer Reed and the outreach team. They agreed on a plan. There would be calm conversation first. There would be clear warnings with notes and body cameras on. There would be calls to parents or guardians if needed. There would be specific consequences for property damage and harassment, but there would also be a path to repair, community service, apology, mentorship. Elena believed in both safety and second chances, and today she would do both. The group at the corner had noticed the new arrivals. Their voices dimmed. 2 slowly drifted away down a side street. 3 stayed, leaning heavier on the fence than before, eyes sharp and uncertain. The slimmer boy, Mrs. Harris remembered his quiet glance from the other night, stood a little back, like a person who had not decided which way to lean. Officer Reed and Marcus walked together toward the corner, not fast, not slow. They stopped at a respectful distance and introduced themselves. Tasha stood a few steps behind with another outreach worker, calm and open. Elena remained by the porch with Mrs. Harris, not to hide, but to give space to the first talk. "We're here because we've had reports of disturbances," Officer Reed said in a clear, steady tone that carried, but did not shout. "This is a residential street. People deserve peace. We want to understand what's going on and set some clear rules. No blocking driveways. No loud gatherings late at night. No touching anyone's property. That includes fences and plants. Do you understand?" The tallest of the young men shifted his weight and smirked a little, but his eyes were watchful. "We're just hanging out," he said. "We didn't do anything." Marcus nodded, acknowledging the words without agreeing or disagreeing. "Hanging out can be fine," he said. "But hanging out turns into harm when it keeps someone from leaving their own home, or when it makes an elder afraid to sit on her porch. That's not who you want to be. And if it is, then there are consequences." Officer Reed explained the consequences not with threats, but with facts. Citations for noise at certain hours. Fines for vandalism. Community service for first-time property damage, with supervised repair. If there was harassment following, blocking, taunting, there could be a formal complaint and, if needed, a trip to the station to talk with guardians present. He held a small body camera at chest level. It blinked gently. "This is recording," he said. "It protects you and it protects us." The slimmer boy looked at the camera and then at Marcus. Something in his face softened. "We didn't mean to make her scared," he said quietly. The taller one shot him a look, but did not speak. "Then this is the time to change," Marcus said. "You can help fix what got bent. You can help repaint the fence. You can apologize. Or you can pretend." From the porch, she saw shoulders tense and then loosen, as if a tight rope inside those young bodies had been gently lowered instead of pulled harder. The tall one glanced at the slimmer boy and then looked away. The slimmer boy took a small step forward and spoke again, still soft. "My name is Jalen," he said. "I didn't mean for it to get like this." Marcus nodded. "Thank you for saying your name, Jalen. That matters." He kept his voice steady. "Here is a simple path. Today, you help us put things right. This weekend, you can join a repair day, paint the fence, replant flowers, clean the sidewalk. You show you can be better neighbors. We'll be there with you. If you choose this, we note it. If you walk away and repeat the same actions, then the next steps are formal. Which road do you want?" A quiet stretched across the corner like a thin sheet. Even the birds seemed to pause. Then the tall one shrugged, not as bold as before. "Whatever," he said, but the word did not have the same edge. "I guess we can help." Officer Reed wrote the names they offered. Tasha handed each of them a small card with the date for the repair day and a phone number in case they had questions. "Bring work shoes," she said. "We'll bring gloves," she added, and if you have something you want to learn, painting, planting, fixing a loose step, ask us. We'll show you. This is how a block becomes strong. When the conversation ended, nobody cheered. That was not the point. The point was a turn, a small one, but real. The young men drifted away in twos and threes, quieter than before. Officer Reed returned to the porch and gave Mrs. Harris a gentle nod. "We'll stay near this week," he said. "You won't have to carry this alone." "Thank you," Mrs. Harris said. She meant every syllable. Elena sat with her for a while after the officers stepped back to their cars. They did not talk much at first. They shared the kind of quiet that has weight and comfort. Finally, Elena spoke. "We'll host a neighbor circle tomorrow morning," she said. "Not a big event. Just a few chairs by your fence, coffee and listening. If the boys come, they come. If not, the neighbors will, and we'll keep shaping the street with steady hands." "I would like that," Mrs. Harris said. "I will bake something." Elena laughed softly. "You always feed people," she said. "Maybe that is the strongest power of all." The next day, the street looked like itself again. The corner was empty, the air mild, the sky kind. Miss Lopez, the mail carrier, arrived early with a folding chair she kept in her truck. Mr. Patel brought a tray of tea and cups. Amira came with her uncle, who carried a small toolbox and a level. Marcus and Tasha set out 6 chairs and a simple hand-painted sign, "Good Neighbor Circle." Officer Reed stood nearby, not hovering, not heavy, simply present. At 9 sharp, Elena arrived with a clipboard and a smile. Short and sweet, she told the group. "We name what we want to protect. We name what needs to change. We agree on a few clear steps." She turned to Mrs. Harris. "Would you like to start?" Mrs. Harris did not stand. She stayed seated, let her hands rest on her lap, and lifted her face so everyone could see her calm eyes. "I want a street where people feel safe to sit outside," she said. "I want mornings when the only loud thing is birds. I want young people to feel seen in a good way, and elders too. I want fences to be for flowers, not for marks. I want to know that if someone needs help, we can call each other. That is all." It was quiet for a few breaths. Then Miss Lopez spoke. "I want to do my route without worrying that someone will be mocked for asking for peace," she said. Mr. Patel added, "I want the kids who come to my store to come for snacks and smiles, not for attention they will later regret." They went around in a small circle. People spoke only a sentence or two each, like placing smooth stones in a shared bowl. At the edge of the group, 3 boys approached slowly: Jalen, the tall one, and another with a baseball cap pulled low. They did not sit right away. They stood a step back, listening, as if testing the air. No one stared at them. No one called them out. The circle stayed open, like a door. When there was a pause, Jalen cleared his throat. "We can help fix the fence," he said, almost to the ground. "We will come Saturday." Elena nodded with simple gratitude. "Thank you," she said. "We'll have paint and brushes. Gloves too." The tall one shoved his hands in his pockets. "I can paint," he muttered. "I helped my cousin last summer." "Good," Marcus said. "Then you'll lead that part." They wrote a short list together, the kind of plan that fits on a single page: Saturday morning, fence repair and sidewalk cleaning. Replant crushed flowers, add 2 new planters by the porch. Evening quiet hours posted, no loud gathering after 9. Outreach games at the park next Friday: basketball, music, art wall so hanging out has a better place. Porch watchers schedule: neighbors take turns sitting outside for an hour, waving at folks, saying hello, being present in a gentle way. They all sign the paper. Elena called it the Good Neighbor Pledge. She made a copy on her phone and sent it to everyone who had come. When Mrs. Harris signed, her handwriting was steady. Then she did something small but meaningful. She slid the pen toward Jalen first, not the tall one, and waited. Jalen looked surprised, then careful. He signed. The tall one signed after, with a quick, almost shy line. Saturday came bright and warm. The white van returned with brushes, drop cloths, and a bucket with a lid that clicked. The outreach team set up a card table with hand wipes, water, and tape. Amira and her uncle measured the fence panels and marked straight lines with chalk. Mr. Patel arrived with a box of pastries and a big roll of paper towels. Miss Lopez came on her day off and brought a bag of shiny screws just in case. Even Miss Evelyn made it, wearing a hat with a ribbon, leaning on a cane that matched her dress. At first, the boys moved stiffly, unsure. But paint has a way of turning strangers into teammates. The tall one carefully pressed a brush along the top edge while Jalen filled the wider spaces. The boy in the baseball cap set down a drop cloth without being asked. "You ever paint trim?" Amira's uncle asked. The tall one shook his head. "You will today," the uncle said kindly, and showed him how to keep his wrists steady, how to let the brush glide instead of fight. Mrs. Harris did not hover. She set out cups and a pitcher of lemonade. She brought a plate of warm cornbread from her oven and watched it vanish in minutes. Every now and then, she walked to the plants, touched a leaf, and smiled at how straight the fence looked behind the green. When a marigold stem bent under an elbow, the boy in the cap winced. "Sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't see it." Mrs. Harris knelt with him and showed how to brace the stem with a gentle loop of twine. "Plants are teachers," she said. "They show us how to repair what's been bent." By midday, the fence shone. The paint had dried to a clean, honest color. The sidewalk looked fresh after a sweep and a wash. The new planters sat by the porch steps like small guardians. The boys stood back with the others and admired the work the way people do when they know they have made something better with their own hands. "Looks good," the tall one said, and this time there was no smirk. There was only a simple pride he did not try to hide. Elena arrived near the end with a stack of small certificates printed at her office. The top line read, "Community Repair Day, thank you." She handed one to each helper and took a photo for the city newsletter, a gentle photo, no names posted without permission, just hands and brushes and flowers and a clean fence. "This is how we build safety," she said. "Not only with rules, but with repair." Before they left, Jalen stepped toward the porch. He held his cap in his hands. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, looking at Mrs. Harris directly now. "For the noise. For the blocking. I got carried away with the group. I forgot someone lives here." He swallowed. "My grandma used to sit on her porch too. I wouldn't want anyone to bother her." Mrs. Harris's eyes softened. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "You made it better today. Keep choosing the better next time too." She did not lecture. She gave him trust to hold. The days that followed were different in small, steady ways. The corner was not a stage anymore. It was a passing place where people nodded and moved on. If a group started to gather after dark, someone would quietly remind them of the pledge, and the group would drift to the park or back home. The door camera did not catch trouble, it caught deliveries, friends, and the nightly arrival of a cat that liked to sit on the porch rail and pretend it owned the block. Officer Reed kept his promise about the gentle watch. His car passed now and then, not in a heavy way, but in a way that said, "We see you and we care." The outreach team started a Friday game night at the park. Jalen showed up and helped set up cones for a short foot race. The tall one came too, a little later, pretending it was no big deal. Tasha gave them a few small jobs keeping score, handing out water, and made sure to say thank you in a voice that reached them. On Sunday afternoons, Mrs. Harris began a new habit. She set out a small book basket on her porch with a hand-lettered sign, Take one, bring one. Children stopped and peered in. Some took a book and left a drawing. Some only leafed through pages and smiled. Once, late in the day, the boy in the cap slipped a comic into the basket, looked around, and walked on, whistling softly. Neighbors noticed the new rhythm. A man who seldom spoke before started waving every morning. A woman who had been unsure about stepping in now kept a broom by her door and used it when the wind pushed leaves into the street. Mr. Patel stocked a few more school notebooks near the register and moved them to a lower shelf so teenagers could reach them without asking. Miss Lopez put a small sticker on her mail cart that said, "We look out for each other." One evening, Elena returned with a small frame. Inside the frame was the Good Neighbor Pledge, printed cleanly, with signatures in blue and black ink. "May I hang this by your door?" she asked. "It belongs to the whole block, but it started here." "You may," Mrs. Harris said. They placed the frame on a small nail near the bell. The new door camera blinked gently beside it, a quiet little eye that now seemed like a friend. That night, Mrs. Harris sat by her window with her notebook. She turned to a fresh page. She wrote the date. Then she wrote, in her neat hand, "Fence repaired today. Flowers replanted. Apologies made. Peace held." She paused and added one more line, the truest line of all, "One call opened many doors." She closed the notebook and glanced at the photo frame of younger faces. She remembered the years when she had offered small kindnesses without expecting anything in return. She understood something deep as the room filled with the soft sound of evening: kindness does not disappear. It goes forward, finds work to do, and returns when it's needed most. Before bed, she stepped onto the porch. The air was soft. The planters released the faintest green smell. A neighbor's wind chime sang a gentle note. Across the street, a figure passed Jalen walking home with an easy pace. He noticed her and lifted a hand. She raised her hand back. No words were needed. She went inside and turned off the light. The house felt like it had always felt, a place of safety and welcome, but now the street matched it. The block had found its balance again. Not a loud triumph, not a headline, just a daily goodness that held. Mrs. Harris smiled as she drew the curtain. She was not surprised. She had believed, all along, that quiet strength could change a day. She had believed that facts could light a path. She had believed that one well-placed call, made with steady breath and a calm heart, could help a whole neighborhood remember who it wanted to be. And that is exactly what happened.